Have you ever felt that subtle, insistent urge? Can check your phone, scroll just one more minute.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe grab another snack, even when you're pretty sure you don't really need it.
Exactly. Or maybe just life itself feels a bit, I don't know, flat, a little boring sometimes.
Hmm.
What if that feeling, that pull, isn't some kind of moral failing, but it's actually, well, it's your brain's chemistry, constantly seeking balance, even in just everyday stuff?
That's a really interesting way to put it.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're really going deep, cutting through some of the noise around dopamine. We've got some really potent insights from an expert on addiction.
Glad to be diving in.
Yeah, and our mission here isn't just to say what dopamine does. We want to really grasp why it's so important, how it's shaping our modern lives, actually.
And how understanding it can maybe give you, the listener, a bit more mastery over your own impulses. Find a bit more well-being.
Absolutely. So let's start right there.
Yeah.
Dopamine. We hear the word all the time, but what is it, really? This core neurotransmitter, this messenger molecule.
Well, it is a neurotransmitter. It's one of those key chemicals that lets neurons, talk to each other across that little gap between them.
Okay.
And yeah, it's definitely tied up with reward, with feeling good. But what's really fascinating, I think, is its deep connection to movement.
Movement. How so?
Think about early humans, right?
Yeah.
Movement was essential. You had to move to find rewards, food, water, safety. So dopamine isn't just about experiencing pleasure. It kind of drives us to seek it out.
Oh, that makes sense.
And it's important, definitely significant, but, it's not the only thing involved in pleasure. There are other players, too.
Right. So going beyond that common understanding, what's something about dopamine that most people just don't get, something that really shifts the perspective?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Dopamine isn't just about those big hits of pleasure we feel. Most people don't realize we're always releasing some baseline level of dopamine. Think of it like a constant low-level hum in the background.
A baseline, okay.
Yeah, a tonic release. And pleasure, real pleasure, that feeling of yes, that's when dopamine spikes above that baseline.
Got it.
But here's the flip side, and this is crucial. Discomfort, craving, even what we perceive as pain, that happens when dopamine dips below that baseline.
Whoa, so it's the up and the down relative to this baseline.
Exactly. It's the deviation from that baseline, not just the isolated peaks, that really shapes our moment-to-moment experience of pleasure and pain. It's this constant flux.
That baseline deviation idea.
Wow.
Does that mean it could be linked to someone's general mood? Maybe even things like chronic depression?
It absolutely could. There's actually pretty strong evidence suggesting that people dealing with chronic depression might have lower tonic dopamine levels. Their baseline is just lower to begin with.
That makes a scary amount of sense.
It's a very reasonable connection, yeah. And this leads right into another critical point. If we constantly, chronically expose ourselves to things, substances, behaviors, whatever, that cause massive dopamine floods.
Like drugs. Or maybe even constant social media scrolling.
Could be, yes. Things that give us way more dopamine than our brains were really designed to handle. When we do that repeatedly, the brain tries to adapt. It tries to compensate.
How does it compensate?
By lowering that tonic baseline over time, it essentially says, whoa, too much stimulation, and resets its own normal level goer.
So then it takes more to feel good. And normal stuff feels kind of blah.
Precisely. It makes it harder to feel pleasure from everyday simple things. The baseline has shifted down.
Okay, so what does this mean for us navigating our daily lives? I mean, we live in a world just overflowing with easy dopamine hits, right?
Yes.
Phones, entertainment, food.
It means we need to understand this dynamic. It brings us right to one of the, I think, most significant findings in neuroscience in the last, say, 75 years. This idea of the pleasure-pain balance.
Ah, yes, the seesaw analogy you use, or the balance scale. Tell us about that. It sounds fundamental.
It really is. Imagine a seesaw inside your brain, perfectly balanced. Now, pleasure and pain are processed in the same parts of the brain. They're collocated.
Okay, same location.
Right. So when you experience pleasure, the seesaw tips to the pleasure side. When you experience pain, it tips to the pain side. Simple enough.
Makes sense.
But here's the brain's absolute #1 rule. It hates being tilted. It wants to be level. It wants homeostasis, neutrality.
Okay, it always tries to get back to the middle.
Always. And here's the really clever bit. Any deviation, any tip to one side, automatically triggers an equal and opposite reaction to push it back the other way, like a counterweight.
An equal and opposite. Okay. So if I binge watch a show I love, that's tipping it hard towards pleasure.
Exactly. Lots of dopamine, a big tip to the pleasure side.
So what happens when I finally hit stop, when the show ends?
That's when the counterweight kicks in
Yeah.
immediately. The pleasure tip triggers its opposite, a tip to the pain side. That's the come down.
The come down. Is that like feeling a bit restless or bored or wanting more?
That's exactly it. That slight discomfort, that urge for just one more episode, that's your brain actively rebalancing, pushing the seesaw back towards level by tipping it briefly to the pain side.
And biologically, what's happening then?
Neurobiologically, after that big dopamine release, your brain compensates. It actually downregulates its own dopamine receptors or reduces transmission, becomes less sensitive for a bit. That is the biological mechanism of the come down, that dip below your baseline.
Wow. Okay. And the real danger then is if you don't just ride out that little dip, if you immediately chase more pleasure.
Precisely. That's the trap. If you don't wait, if you keep indulging, keep hitting that pleasure side again and again without letting the balance reset,
What happens?
your brain can get stuck. The seesaw gets weighted down on the pain side. You end up in what's called a dopamine deficit state.
Which feels like.
Feels a lot like clinical depression, honestly. Marked by things like anxiety, irritability, insomnia, just the general feeling of blindness, dysphoria, and a constant preoccupation mentally with whatever it was you were overdoing.
Yeah.
The seesaw loses its springiness, stuck leaning towards pain.
That's powerful. Think about those times when you just had to do something, again, that little nagging discomfort pushing you. That could literally be your brain's seesaw tipping below baseline.
It very likely is.
So given how this works, who's more likely to get caught in these patterns? Who's more vulnerable to addiction?
Well, we do see some interesting correlations. For example, people who tend to be more impulsive. Meaning, folks who have a thought to do something and just do it without much pause or reflection. They seem to be more vulnerable.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating nuance because while that impulsivity can be really challenging in our modern world with temptations everywhere.
Yeah, it seems like a disadvantage now.
Right. But maybe in different historical settings, that quick action bias could have actually been advantageous. Now, though, we're just bombarded. We constantly need to hit the brakes, practice self-regulation.
That makes sense. What else contributes to vulnerability?
Well, there's another really powerful idea, I think. It's the notion that for many people who struggle with addiction, quote, normal life simply isn't interesting enough.
Wow. Normal life isn't interesting enough. That really hits home, especially thinking about our modern world. Can you expand on that? How does boredom connect?
Yeah, I think life for humans has always been hard, obviously. But now, for many of us, it's hard in a different way. It can be profoundly boring.
Boring, even with all the entertainment.
Yes, because our basic survival needs are often met so easily. For a lot of people, you barely need to leave the house to get food, water, shelter. Those fundamental drives aren't constantly pushing us.
Right, the immediate struggle isn't there for many.
Exactly. So we're all kind of forced to make stuff up to find meaning and drive. Become a scientist, train as an athlete, climb a mountain, whatever it is.
We'll create our own challenges.
We have to. And people vary a lot in their need for friction, their need for challenge, novelty, intensity. Some people just need more of that. And if they don't find it in healthy ways,
they get unhappy.
Deeply unhappy. And maybe their brains just aren't that well suited to this world. We've built a world that, for them, lacks that inherent struggle, that necessary friction, so they might seek it elsewhere, maybe through high dopamine substances or behaviors.
That's fascinating. It really challenges a simple idea that addiction is just about seeking pleasure. It could be about escaping boredom or finding intensity the world doesn't easily provide.
It's definitely a factor for some.
So if our brain's balance can get stuck, tilted towards pain, towards that deficit state, the big question is, how do we fix it? How do we reset that seesaw?
Right. And the good news is we absolutely can. Our brains are remarkably resilient. They can reset. In my clinical work, what we typically see is that, on average, about 30 days of zero interaction with that specific high dopamine substance or behavior is needed.
30 days. Like a total abstinence period.
Exactly. A period of consciously depriving the brain of that excessive stimulation. That gives the reward pathways, the dopamine transmission systems, the chance to regenerate, to basically heal themselves and recalibrate back to that healthier baseline.
So like a dopamine fast, essentially. What's that 30-day period actually like for someone going through it? Is it just smooth sailing once you start?
Oh, definitely not. And this is so important for people to know up front. You will almost certainly feel worse before you feel better.
Okay, worse before better. How bad is worse?
The first 1 to 2 weeks can be genuinely tough. You often see significant anxiety, maybe trouble sleeping, feeling physically agitated, irritable. It's real discomfort. You have to be prepared for that.
That's rough.
It is. But here's the encouraging part. If you can push through those first 2 weeks, usually around week 3, it's like, well, the sun starts to come out a bit. Things begin to ease up.
Like a glimmer of hope.
Yes. And by week 4, most people report feeling significantly better. Often better than they felt even before they stopped the problematic behavior. Their dopamine system starts responding normally again.
Just simple things.
To simple things like really tasting and enjoying a good cup of coffee or appreciating a sunset, things that might have felt totally flat before. The baseline is coming back up.
That's incredibly hopeful. Now, something you hear about a lot is relapse. Often we associate it with stress, right? Bad day, big loss. But what about the other side? Relapsing when things are going well. I've heard of people doing great in recovery. Then a big success happens, and somehow that triggers a return to old habits. How does that work?
That's a really, really astute point. And yes, it happens surprisingly often. We need to understand triggers. A trigger is anything associated with past use that makes you want to use again. Now, the key insight is that encountering a trigger, whether it's a person, place, thing, or even a feeling like stress or success, releases a little burst of dopamine.
Even the trigger itself gives a dopamine hit.
A mini spike, yes. It's anticipatory dopamine. Your brain remembers the association. But here's the kicker. That little spike is immediately followed by a dip. It doesn't just go back to baseline. It drops below baseline.
Back to the deviation.
Exactly. That little dopamine deficit state is craving. It's that uncomfortable feeling that motivates you to seek the reward your brain predicts will fix it.
So dopamine isn't just pleasure. It's the wanting, the drive.
Precisely. It's much more about motivation and pursuit than the pleasure experience itself. So, yeah, stress is a common trigger, obviously. But for some people, the trigger is actually things going too well.
Like success.
It could be the reward of success itself, or very often it's the relaxation that comes with success. Maybe they let down their guard, that intense hypervigilance they needed for sobriety eases up.
And the thought is?
The thought might be, I deserve to celebrate, or things are good, let's make them even better, or I can handle just one now. They want to add more reward onto the existing reward. When someone understands this about themselves, that maybe their biggest vulnerability is when things are going great, that self-awareness is incredibly protective, they can anticipate it and build in safeguards.
That shifts the focus entirely. It's not just about avoiding bad feelings, but managing good ones too. This leads me to think, beyond the brain chemistry, what about our actions, our words? You mentioned the power of truth-telling in recovery. Can you say more about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the most striking things you see. People deep in recovery learn that telling the truth is central. And not just about the big thing, like whether they used or not. It's about the small stuff, too. Like learning to stop saying, oh, I hit traffic, when really you just left late because you wanted more coffee. Those little white lies we all tell. People recovering from addiction often realize they've developed a habit of bending the truth about everything because the habit of deception itself became ingrained.
So recovery involves honesty about everything.
Pretty much, yes. Striving for rigorous honesty. And there's actually a potential neuroscience reason for this.
Really?
Well,
how does telling the truth connect to brain circuits?
Well, the idea is that consistently telling the truth might actually help strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the thinking, planning part of the brain, and its connections down to the limbic system, the reward and emotion areas.
And those connections are important.
Hugely important. Those are the very connections that often get weakened or sort of disconnected in addiction. Strengthening them helps restore that ability to think ahead, to anticipate future consequences, to think through the drink or the impulse, to consider not just the immediate feeling, but the impact tomorrow, next week, next year.
So honesty is like exercise for the prefrontal cortex.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah, it potentially makes those critical circuits stronger. And then there's the huge social benefit, too.
Oh, so?
Being open and honest, truly vulnerable with others creates real intimacy and genuine connection with other people. That itself releases dopamine in a healthy way. It fosters that sense of shared humanity, that feeling of, oh, thank God I'm not the only one who feels this way. That's incredibly healing.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to some cutting-edge, maybe even controversial topics. What about using drugs to treat drug addiction? specifically psychedelics like psilocybin or MDMA. It seems counterintuitive, right? A dopamine feast to cure a dopamine problem.
Yeah, it does seem paradoxical, and like I said, healthy skepticism is good here. It potentially violates that dopamine fast principle we discussed for resetting the baseline.
But there is some research, right?
There is. Small, controlled clinical studies, mainly looking at alcohol addiction, for instance. They've used high-dose psilocybin or MDMA, but, and this is critical, it's always done within a very specific legal clinical setting. And it's completely interwoven with intensive, ongoing psychotherapy.
It's not just about taking the substance.
Not at all. The therapy context is essential, and they use carefully selected individuals. When it seems to work for these individuals, it's often described as producing a transformational experience.
Meaning?
It seems to give the person a new perspective, maybe a spiritual insight or a sudden clarification of their core values. They might have a profound realization like, my family means everything and my drinking is destroying that connection, that kind of deep shift.
So powerful under very specific conditions.
Exactly. Very specific, very controlled. That's why I'm personally still quite cautious about thinking of it as a widespread solution. Addiction is typically a chronic, relapsing illness, and it's hard to see how one or two intense experiences can be a magic bullet for everyone long term.
And what's the risk with all the hype around it now?
Well, the big unintended consequence, I think, is people misinterpreting the data. They hear psychedelics help addiction and think it's okay to self-medicate or microdose on their own for personal growth or whatever.
Outside of therapy.
Yes, completely outside that controlled therapeutic container. And frankly, that almost never works out well. It's just not what the science supports. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all answer.
Okay, important caveats. Now, speaking of things that affect our brains daily, social media. You hear it called addictive all the time. Is it, really? From your perspective?
Look, I'll just say it plainly. Social media is a drug, and it's been quite deliberately engineered to be one.
Engineered how?
Through variable rewards, constant novelties, social validation cues, all designed to hook into those dopamine pathways we've been talking about.
So should we just avoid it entirely?
Not necessarily. It can be used healthily, but it requires real intentionality. Healthy use means you decide when and why you're using it. It's planned. You use it as a tool for specific connections or information rather than letting it use you, pulling you into that endless, mindless scroll.
Being the user, not the used.
Exactly.
So what's the big challenge for us as a society with this digital drug?
I think our collective challenge, maybe even our mission, needs to be actively preserving and maintaining our offline ways of connecting. Real-world interactions.
Why that's so important?
Because every minute, every ounce of energy we pour into the online world is energy we're not investing in our real lives, our face-to-face relationships, our communities. We're subtly divesting from reality.
That's a sobering thought. Any practical advice for managing this?
Absolutely. Create barriers. Literal physical barriers. Leave your phone in another room sometimes. And metacognitive barriers. Consciously decide before you pick it up what you intend to do and for how long.
Why are barriers so key?
Because they help you break that cycle of constant interruption and distraction. I genuinely worry we're losing our ability for sustained thought, for original thought. That requires focus, periods without interruption.
That moment when a thought gets difficult.
Yes. And it's just so easy to reach for the phone, check email, get that little dopamine hit of novelty. But when you do that, you break the thread. You lose the chance to wrestle with the idea, to finish the thought. You end up just reacting, not creating. That's where creative energy comes from, that sustained, sometimes difficult focus.
We've covered so much ground here. From dopamine's surprising dual nature, that delicate pleasure-pain seesaw, why some of us might be more vulnerable.
To the practical steps for resetting that balance, the surprising strength in just being honest.
Right, and even looking at psychedelics and the digital drug in our pockets. Our goal with this deep dive, as always, isn't just to throw information at you, but to offer understanding. Understanding that hopefully gives you, the listener, a bit more mastery over your own inner world.
And maybe a key takeaway is the importance of aiming for a resilient balance, not a rigid one. A balance that can experience pleasure, move towards it, feel pain, recoil from it. That's normal. That's adaptive. We wouldn't want a seesaw that never tilts.
So the goal isn't numbness.
Not at all. People in recovery often talk about learning to tolerate things being a little boring a lot of the time, and that is part of healing that dopamine system. But the ultimate goal isn't a flat line. It's a balance that knows how to return to center naturally, so you can appreciate those simple, everyday pleasures again. That baseline comes back up.
So as you go about your day navigating this world full of easy dopamine and constant stimuli, maybe consider this. What's one small intentional barrier you could create today? Just one small change to carve out a moment for quiet, for sustained thought, to give your own amazing brain a chance to find its balance.
And what unexpected joy might just bubble up in that quiet space.
Exactly. We really hope this deep dive helps you see your daily habits, your feelings, your urges with a fresh, more informed perspective. Keep exploring, keep questioning.